Hello everyone, it's Sierra Milliman, and today I'm going to talk about three different Cinderella stories from three different cultures. So first we have Damatia, and that is from the Mexican culture. Then we have Anklet for a Princess, and that is from the Indian culture. And then we have the Golden Sandal, and that is a Middle Eastern Cinderella story. So to begin, each of these definitely brings in their own culture and heritage and the way they work. So first, I'm going to start with Damatia. And what this story is about a young girl who is living in a very poor part of Mexico. It's actually a ranch in Hidalgo, Mexico, and about how she had earned her love from the prince or the governor's son through hard work. And that's kind of one of the reasons this story is so different, is because instead of the magic, especially like the other two use, or that we're used to seeing in the normal Cinderella stories, it uses hard work, although there's just a little bit of magic. So if I can, give me a second and I will share my screen with you to bring that up. Excuse me, the little cat is deciding she needs to be in everything. So first we have Damatia, and like I said, it is on a ranch, sun bleached and dry in Mexico. And it's a poor farmer and his wife and their daughter. And they make bricks from clay and sand and dirt, and that becomes important later on in the thing. But her family also makes leather. And as you can see, the artist really chose to depict their culture through all the different art. We have the mountains in the background and showing that, and then we have the texture of the bricks and the lines proving of the bricks, and it even shows the shadows and definitely gives that feel of the Mexican architecture. Yeah. So if we go on, it talks about how she decided to go work for the governor because her family was in desperate need of money, and this was a great way for her to go help earn some money for her family so that they can live. So she did this because her mother becomes really, really sick. So and then, like I said, their families are here. It shows again, they're working at leather making and creating beautiful sandals and money pouches. But her mother becomes sick, and their house is actually made of this clay and dirt to where when it rains, it cannot withstand the rain. So a huge storm comes in and starts to basically have their house melt away. So then it goes on, and at this part, the governor, Damatia, she makes these dessert cactus things and for him, but he has decided that he is too uppity and kind of is a little snobby about it and was like, why would I eat these? This is a poor people's dish, basically, and I wouldn't even try this. And then his grandmother tells him, just try it, just try a bite, and he falls in love with this dessert. It is amazing. He thinks it is the greatest thing he has ever eaten, and that her cooking is just perfect. So what happens is her mother becomes greatly ill, and she is awakened by a message saying from her father saying, you need to come home right away. Your mother's going to be passing on. And before she gets home, she had already passed on. And this is the part where she sinks down. She's head in her hands, she's sobbing, and her mother's spirit comes. And her mother's spirit is basically kind of the fairy godmother in this situation. Because, and this quote is, I will always be with you, my child, and remember what my mother told me and her mother told her. And this is kind of the magic part. There isn't so much magic in the story as much as this quote that she lives her life by. And that is, I make sure I read it just right. Do every task with care and always add a generous dash of love. And so even with that task or with that quote, that's what makes her cooking so amazing. So the next day, the prince decides he wants that cook's cooking. He wants Domitia's cooking. And the other cook who was there was like, well, I'm sorry, that's not me. She ran back home because her mother is sick, but she did leave this leather strap. And it came from her sandal. So her shoe is this leather strap, and it's what her family made. So it goes on, and his grandmother actually gives him this shawl to take with him because he is set on this task. He is going to find whoever this girl was who cooked so amazing and takes so much thought and care into her work that he must find her. He needs to marry this woman. And his abuela gives him this shawl, and it's this purple shawl to go with him. And that shawl, in a way, is kind of like the gown, is kind of like Cinderella's gown in a way. So move on, and he finds he's going about this journey, and he happens upon Malvina, and she automatically, when he starts describing this woman, this girl that he is trying to find, she knows who it is. She's like, oh yeah, that would obviously be Domitia. But she decides that she's going to send Timoteo on a wild goose chase while she sets up the plan to make her daughter, her own daughter, into the one that he is looking for. So she sets up this plan, and her daughter head to Domitia's house, where they give all sorts of food to this house. And basically, Malvina makes it to where Domitia's father marries her. So she becomes the stepmother in this scenario. And she makes Domitia work so hard. She adds on the bricks, and basically every Cinderella story where they make the stepdaughter overworked like no other and just keep handing her chores and chores and chores after chores. And so that's what she is. So then it comes, and he's still searching, and then all of a sudden the prince in this scenario gets a whiff, the smell of where he's like, that has to be her. Like, she had to have cooked whatever is making that smell. So he goes to this fiesta. And in a way, this fiesta is kind of like the ball, because it is the big event that led him to her, or at least that's the way I looked at it. And so he runs into this older lady, and she's like, "Oh yeah, you're talking about Dalmatia. She's amazing. She sold out of her food, and she just went to her mother's grave to visit with her." And that's when he found her. So he looked down, and he had that leather strap that he's been carrying on, searching for her. He had that leather strap and looked down at her sandals and saw that it was matching. And so that's where the glass slipper moment came, where it fit perfectly. And then he decided to put the shawl on her, and that's where the gown came into play. But basically, he ended up finding her through her food from this fiesta. And even though he has searched all around, he definitely found it. And they ended up getting married, and just like every other Cinderella story, living happily ever after. The artist definitely uses more of the colors that you would find in Mexico. I mean, they don't make the grass bright and green and anything. They definitely design their outfits to match the culture. And even the borders on the pages with words on them, I couldn't think of what those would be, but they designed those. And I like how they use the light around her to show how that is her mother, or her fairy godmother. So basically, in conclusion, Damatia is a sweet, hardworking girl who came from a poor family from a very poor community in Mexico, and her gown would be considered abuela's shawl. The shoe is the leather strap that fell off her sandal, and her and Dalmatia's family actually made those. The stepmother would be Malvina, and she is the woman who first met the governor's son and led him on a wild goose chase. And then the prince, Timoteo, or the governor's son, the magic it doesn't really use magic, but it mostly follows this quote: "Do every task with care, and never forget to add a pinch of love, or a generous amount of love." And I feel like following that quote is really what brought the magic into the story. And that's her following this quote and believing in that such strongly is what led her to becoming into this new kind of power. Her fairy godmother would be her mother's spirit in the ball. Again, I said the fiesta. There wasn't really an exact ball-like moment in this story, so I just had to pick the one that would be the closest for that one. So next, we have an anklet for a princess. And this one is a story based in India. And the artist definitely uses the different colors, is a huge factor in this one. The different colors definitely shows India. I mean, there isn't really backgrounds or anything, but it's all these bright reds and yellows and blues, and kind of gives the tie-dye effect that you would expect from India. So for anklet for princess, It is set in a little town by the river, and it's set in a past time period where they still had the prince, and they would have to carry water and horse and carriage, that type of time period. And our Cinderella character in this one is called Cinderella, and it's a hardworking girl, and she doesn't complain about her situation. I mean, she's not over here complaining about how terrible her stepmother is and how terrible her stepsister is, and she just does her work. And even though she doesn't get fed a lot, she lives her life and she deals with it. She doesn't complain. She's not refusing. She knows what she has to do and she gets it done. So this one uses a lot of magic, um, which is good. But she travels to the river to get some water. And while at that river, she meets this snake. And this snake is what would be considered the fairy godmother in this situation. He is a magical snake, which I thought was kind of odd in a way. I know in the Indian culture it makes sense, but in like almost every other culture, the snake is usually depicted as someone who is evil and they have this bad about them. And so when it became the snake that was her godfather in this story, I was kind of sitting here reading the book like, feel like he might backstab her being a snake. That's usually how the stories with snakes go, but he didn't. So I was actually surprised about that one, and I liked it. But he meets her, and he's like, "You're so beautiful. Why are you so dirty and dressed in ugly rags? And why do you look like you have barely ate?" And she explains everything, and she's like, "But it's enough to eat." And her, I guess I need to point out, her stepmother and stepsister are not like her father remarried. It is told in this book how in the Indian culture it is normal for a man to have several wives and to have children with each of those wives so that there is enough people in the family to support a farm and there's enough helping hands. And so that's what happened in this one. Her parents had gotten married, and then her father also married a second wife and had a child with that second wife. And I gotta find, I can't remember exactly where it was. Oh yeah. Yeah, there was an epidemic of cholera, I guess. And it swept through their village and ended up killing her mother and her father. So she has this snake come to her, and he decides to help her. He gives her all sorts of food every time she comes down and says, "Whenever you need help, come ask." And he's going to make her life easier. And all she has to do is sing this song here, and he will come. So it becomes, and then the stepmother and stepdaughter notice that she is gaining weight. She's starting to look good. Like, because before she was very unhealthy looking, and that was because she didn't eat. And so the stepmother asked the stepdaughter to go follow her one day. And that's when the stepsister found out about this fairy godfather snake, the godfather snake. And So they both come back. Now, Lotta, which was the stepsister, believed that the snake was frightening. And he had a big shining jewel on his head that looked like a third eye. So she comes home, and it tells about how the crown prince is coming to the village, and he will be here at the Navaratri festival. And the Navaratri festival is what I'm considering to be the ball. So just like in the Cinderella that we've all read, the Disney version that I was obsessed with when I was little, the stepmother and the stepdaughter all got dressed up and became beautiful in all their jewels and their finest clothing, and they told her that she had to make all the jobs. Like, she had to get back to work. She couldn't go. She had to get back to work. She had to go on her household duties. But when she finished all of her chores, she went to the snake, and she wanted to tell him how she missed going to the festival. And he said, "You deserve one magical evening." And he instructed her to take the jewel from his forehead. She obeyed him and told her to do a dance. And that's when her clothing turned in to gold. I mean, it was beautiful. It says about the purest gold threads, and magnificent jewels appeared in her hair and on her throat and just everywhere. And then she had these anklets, which this anklet is what would be considered the shoe, and all this gold threads and jewels. And when you look at an Indian bride, you see them in such beautiful garments. That's what he put her in, and that would be considered the gown in this scenario. So she went on, and he told her at midnight that she had to leave. So she began to dance, and of course the prince danced with her and fell in love with her. And then at midnight she had to go, but she lost an anklet. So the next morning the prince was like, "No, I'm not marrying anybody except the woman who this anklet belongs to." So they went on a search to find which one could fit into that anklet. And of course, at first they were like, everybody tried it. And of course, Lotta, the stepsister, almost forced it. But then she came home and her stepmother had said that she couldn't go to the fitting until all of her chores were done. And she came home and all of her chores just magically happened to be done. So that was another magic moment. And then she finally was able to try on the anklet, and it fit. And she brought out the other one. And of course, during that time, her stepmother was like, "What are you doing here? Are you sure you finished all your work? And you will be beaten if you've left anything undone." And the prince was like, "Nope, shush, try on." And she tried on the anklet, and it was a perfect fit. Just like the Cinderella glass slipper moment. It was a perfect fit. So they went on and became married. And like I said, the artist definitely brings in all the different aspects of India with the fireworks and the henna on the elephant and the details of the jewels and just the colors. The colors is what really stood out to me in the story on the illustration aspect. So, and eventually they met Cinderella brought the godfather snake to meet her Prince Charming. So, just to review, for an Inklet for a Princess, it's a little town, a little Indian village by the river, and it's in the time period where they still went and got water, and everybody lived based off the farm, and definitely set in the past. And Cinderella, which would have been the Cinderella, she's a hardworking girl. She doesn't complain about her situation, even though she has every right to. And she just goes upon doing her chores and doing what she needs to do to live. And the gown is the snake, the beautiful golden threads and gorgeous jewels that he gave her in order to go to the festival. The shoe would be the anklet. The stepmother, they didn't give the stepmother's name. I kept trying to look, but I couldn't find it. Is the stepmother, and then the sister Lotta. And then the prince is the Prince of Sharongor, is what they wrote. I'm probably not saying that right. The magic is the snake giving her the good food, the snake giving her the amazing water to drink, the snake dressing her up to go to the ball, helping her with all of her chores, and I mean, just being a talking snake in general too. The fairy godmother would have been a fairy godfather snake in this case, and the ball is the Navaratri festival. And so that was all from a Inklet for a Princess. So the third and final Cinderella story I have is The Golden Sandal. And in this one, again, I like how the artist definitely used lines and different aspects to create the correct environment. I was trying to come up with the right word, and they definitely used a lot of texture in this one. I mean, you can kind of see how unstable the table would be here, and how the netting here and the doorway. So in this one, it is about a fisherman whose wife had drowned, and they had a daughter named Maha. And Maha is the Cinderella in this story. And it is set in a little small town near the fisherman's house. Again, poor area, definitely poor power town. They aren't too far out in the country, because I believe it is the master merchant, they live in the same town. So there isn't too crazy about that. But this one was actually kind of different, because it was Maha who kept telling her father, the neighbor lady is really nice to me, Dad. I think you should remarry her. And at first the father was like, no, little one, I shall never marry, for stepmothers are often jealous of another's child. And eventually he gave in, and it turned out he was right. And Maha began to be forced to do all the extra work, and was not given enough to eat, and was overall treated poorly, compared to her other stepsister. And the stepsister, all this was because he saw how much the fisherman loved his own daughter, but then she began to compare the two girls, and didn't like the fact that the fisherman's daughter was kind of better in a way than her own daughter. So one day she was walking with the basket of fish, and there was a voice, and she's like, nobody's around me. And it was this red fish that was in the basket, and he was talking to her. And because she saved his life, she was able to call on him anytime that she needed for help. So she put him back in the river. But then when she got home, the father asked about the redfish, and she was supposed to go get him. And she went to the redfish and called upon him. And this is the first use of magic. He gave her a coin so that she would not get in trouble. So it goes on, and both daughters have grown up into beautiful women, and Maha always is working, and she became beautiful on the inside. So the daughter of the master merchant was supposed to be married, and they were going to do, before the wedding, they're going to sing and celebrate and watch the bride's arms and feet be painted with red henna. And this red henna party is what I would consider the ball. So the bridal henna was the ball. And of course, the fairy godmother is a redfish, and the magic just happens throughout this entire story. So she goes to the water's edge and calls for the redfish and asks, what should I do? I'm very unhappy. And she says, I want to join all the other girls at the bride's henna. And I want to sing and laugh and see all the fancy stuff and just be there. And he said, you shall go, but you should not sit near the door with the other fishermen's daughters. You shall sit on the cushion in the middle of the hall near the bride herself, which is a very powerful statement because the social classes there are just wildly different. So he gives her a silken gown, a pearl comb, and a pair of golden sandals. So right there we have the gown is the silken gown and the pearl comb, and the shoe is a golden sandal. And his only condition was she had to leave before her stepmother left and her stepsister left. So she was having so much fun and talking to everybody and enjoyed it that she almost forgot to leave. So finally she went back home. But then Tarek is what I would consider the prince, and he is the brother of the bride who got her henna tattoo done. And he found this golden slipper and was like, it's so delicate and so beautiful that he must meet its owner. And he went to his mother, and his mother was like, he told his mother he wanted to marry the owner of this sandal. She said, okay, I'll go to every house and I'll figure out who the sandal belongs to. So of course she went to the rich houses and the wealthy section first, and then later on she found their house. And actually Maha's stepmother saw the merchant's wife approaching and shoved her into a bread oven in the yard where she couldn't get out and try on this sandal. And of course her daughter tried and was not able to do it, of course. And then another bout of magic happened, and this rooster crowed and said, the one you seek is hidden below. And so she ordered them to open the oven, and Maha crawled out, and her foot easily fit into the sandal. And there they had it. This one kind of went on a little bit farther, and the stepmother actually bought a perfume that was supposed to make Maha smell like rotting fish and make all her hair fall out. Well, it didn't. And it actually made her smell like roses and her hair beautiful. So when the master merchant's son lifted the veil, he smelled roses and saw this gorgeous woman on their wedding day. Well, then Tarek's brother saw the happiness and was like, oh, I want one from the same family, and went to find Maha's sister. And the mother was like, oh, well, this stuff didn't work really good on Maha, so I'm going to spray it on my daughter because it gave Maha smell like roses and beautiful hair, so it must give my daughter. And it didn't, and it made all of her hair fall out and her smell like fish, and she was sent back to the family, which I thought was kind of more of a funny moment that they were trying to bring into the story, and I liked it. So for this one, A Golden Sandal, a Middle Eastern Cinderella story, we have it set in a village. I wouldn't say it was considered a small village. It was a decent sized village, and in Middle Eastern. And the time period, obviously, you can see in the background they rode camels. It wasn't horses. The houses weren't crazy, so it was set in the past. Cinderella in the story is Maha. The gown was a silken gown and a pearl comb. The shoe would have been the golden sandal. The stepmother is the stepmother in this case, and it is the woman who the fisherman decided to marry. The prince would have been Tariq, and the magic all throughout the story. The talking fish, giving her the coin, the rooster crowing, the magic to get her to the festival. So much in this story. The perfume at the end, everything. The fairy godmother in this case is the red fish, and the ball in this case would be when they went to the bridal henna. So that is it, and I hope you guys enjoyed my 3 Cinderella stories. Thank you.